Hi, this is Reg Athwal and welcome back to Book Videos. You can see this book. It's Spencer Johnson's book, The 1 Minute Father. I thought it'd be great and appropriate seeing it's Father's Day around the world and we're celebrating fatherhood, fathers, grandfathers, all fathers. I thought it'd be appropriate to really talk about this book. Spencer Johnson wrote the first ever book, The 1 Minute Manager. I don't know if any of you have read that book. Very simple book, very powerful. And going back through that, I thought, wow, he co-authored that book with Kenneth Blanchard back in 1977. I didn't know it's been around for that long. And since then, the amount of other books that these guys have put together is absolutely incredible. Okay, so many different books. But let's talk about the 1 Minute Father. And he starts off, he's got a little symbol here, okay, the symbol. He says, and it's a digit, he says, the 1 Minute Father symbol, a 1 minute readout from the face of modern digital watch, is intended to remind each of us to take a minute out of our day every now and then and look into the faces of our children. I think that's pretty cool. So let's get into some of this book. I'm going to take 4 or 5 key areas of the book. And apart from that, I'd say if you haven't read it, go and pick it up from your bookshop, go to Amazon, pick it up from wherever you can. It's nice and simple, 112-page book. That's not going to take long to read. It says, a letter to fathers. You certainly know from your own experience that being a good father takes more than a minute. However, there are ways you can communicate with your children in only a minute that will help them quickly learn how to like themselves and want to behave themselves. The techniques are so simple, it may be difficult for you to believe that they will work. Nonetheless, you may want to do as other parents have successfully done, suspend passing judgment on the 3 communication methods you're going to read about until you've actually used them in your own home for at least 1 month. Then judge yourself. It says, judge for yourself, see how your children's behaviors improve, and ask your children how good they feel about themselves. I'm sure you'll find that I and other practical parents have found with our children, from both the children's and the parents' point of view, it works. So that's the opening letter to all fathers from Spencer Johnson. And I'm just there's many stories in the book. I'm going to read only one and then the rest, just a few quotes from the book for today. So he says, one day a successful man saw that he was lost, and he had been for some time. He began at once to look for an answer to a problem he had never even realized he had. It began soon after the sudden death of his wife. He was left alone with his 5 children. He and his wife had been tried as well as they knew how to raise their children with love and discipline. They did basically what they had seen their parents do. Just pausing there for a second. Did any of us get a manual on how to become a great father or a mother and become a great parent? Or did we just mimic our parents? Whatever they did, that's what we ended up doing. Or maybe we hated the way that they did things and therefore we decided that we were going to do things differently. So I like this thing about, are we just really mimicking our parents and what they did? And he says there, going back, he says to raise the children with love and discipline. They basically did what their parents did. The man never realized, however, how difficult parenting was on a day in and day out basis, and how much his wife had assumed that responsibility. He was beginning to understand what she had been trying to tell him for many, many years. Now, the more time the father spent around his children, the more he realized how unaware he had been. He remembered how often his wife had said that she was frustrated because she felt the situation with the children was getting worse. But he never wanted to acknowledge the problem. The man now saw how challenging her task had been. He knew that it would have been better if they had mutually supported each other in the raising of their children. The man then began to look at his children's behavior, undisguised by their mother's peacekeeping and nurturing ways. He wondered how often she had simply been trying to protect him from his children's misbehavior. Or was it that they who had been protecting him? The more he saw for himself, the more he realized how unruly his children were, how unappreciative they seemed of all that he and their mother had done. And what was that look in their eyes? Their own confusion. He knew he had started his family later in life than most men. He'd been so busy. But what was much of the touch of the younger generation? Were all children this way? How and when did his children get this way? As time went by, the father began to see the beginnings of serious problems in his family, the kind you'd only read about. And as always, of course, in other families and never your own. For the first time, he began to be disturbed by the news reports on television and in the newspapers. He didn't want to think about the things he knew were happening elsewhere, the increased incidence of juvenile drug use, vandalism, delinquency, even violent crime and suicide. He tried to block it all out of his mind, but when he saw his own children staying away from home a little longer, a little more often, he thought about the increasing problem of juvenile runaways. He allowed himself for a moment to realize that families everywhere were experiencing the personal pain behind the impersonal stats. The man loved his children. He decided to do something about it. But what? What would he do first? The once unaware man now looked at his family with new eyes. Then he saw what he hoped was the answer. I have not held my children accountable, he thought. They get away with a great deal, and that is not good for them or for me. What my children need is more discipline, he decided. And the man was right. His children need more discipline. And so he began to discipline them more, the best way he knew how. At first, the man did more of what his parents had done. Whenever his children misbehaved, he either grounded them, threatened them, sent them to their rooms, removed their privileges, or spanked them. But he did not get the results he wanted. So he disciplined them even more, doing more of what he had already done. He was exhausting himself, but his children's behavior improved temporarily. Their attitudes, however, did not. They grew more obedient on the outside, but had more resentment and resentful on the inside. The man could feel the tension in the home. He was becoming frustrated. It seemed as if the harder he tried, the worse the situation became. He knew that he did not know what to do. However, the father had been in this situation in other areas of his life, and he'd always found a successful answer. So he did what he worked out for him so many times before. He looked for someone he knew. And I'll pause there, because that is just really the first few pages of the book as he gets into this beautiful story. And it goes on and on into different areas of what this father learns, what he's meant to do with the first person that he meets, who's a physician and has a cup of coffee with him. So I'm going to summarize some of the learnings and what came up from meeting these people. The first thing he learned was the 1 minute reprimand works well when you do the following things. Here's a few tips, especially when you're trying to create discipline, could be telling your child off. Number 1, I tell my children beforehand that I'm going to reprimand them when their behavior is unacceptable to me. And I encourage them to be just as honest with me. The first half of this process is I reprimand my children as soon as possible. I tell them specifically what they did. I tell my children in no uncertain terms just how I feel about what they have done. I'm silent for a few very long, unpleasant seconds to let them feel what I feel. And then the second half of the process, then I calm down, I touch my children in a way that lets them know that I'm on their side. I remind my children that while their recent behavior was not good, I think they are good. I tell my children I love you, and I hug them. When the reprimand is over, it's over. I don't mention it again. Later in the day, I listen to whatever the children want to tell me. I realize that while it may take me only a minute to reprimand my children with love, the benefits may last for a lifetime. So that's the real first big lesson that he's got in his book around, when your children are misbehaving. Moving on, a few quotes. The best way to get my children to listen is to listen. And I think what he's saying is to listen to them. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. God gave us these tools, and are we using them in the right proportion? Some people act like they've got 2 mouths and no ears. And I think, having worked with so many family businesses myself around the world, this book is really powerful. Having a chance to reread it today and share it with you on Father's Day, it's just so true. Sometimes we really don't know how to communicate with our children, and they don't have to be children as such. You could be 60 years of age and your child today is 35 years of age. Have we still, in all those years, realized how to effectively communicate with our children and be a great father? There is a big difference between being loved and feeling loved. Happy Father's Day, we could say, yes, thank you for putting food on the table. Thank you for putting a roof over our head. But, there's a difference between just saying that I love you and you've done this for me and feeling love. I think there's a clear distinction that Spencer Johnson talks about here, which is, are we feeling love for each other? Or is it just a few words? How many times do you hear, I love you, I love you, I love you? People want to feel it. They don't just want to hear the words. Sometimes people just say the words, but do they really mean it? Is it being expressed? He says, have you hugged your child today? When was the last time you hugged your child? Does that happen? When was the last time you even touched them? Okay. I help my children realize they are already winners. I catch them doing something right. So there's a whole section in this book, great story, where most of the time we're catching our children doing things wrong. I'm guilty of this as well. We've all got things to learn, picking up on small things that can irritate you. But again, the reminder for me today, reading the book again, is really, are we catching them doing something right? And when he talks about doing something right, he's got a section here called 1 minute praisings work when. I tell my children ahead of time that I'm going to praise them when they do something that makes me feel good. And I encourage them to do the same with me. I catch my children doing something right. I tell my children specifically what they did to make one feel that way. Then I tell them how good I feel about what they did and why it makes me feel so good. I stop talking for a few seconds. The silence lets them feel the good feelings themselves. Then I tell them that I love them. I end the praising with a hug, or at least a light touch to let them know that I care. The praising is short and sweet. When it's over, it's over. I realize that it takes me only a minute to praise my children, but feeling good about themselves may last them for a lifetime. I know what I'm doing is good for my children and for me. I feel really good about myself. Okay, so that is the second major rule that he's got in the book. And I'll leave you with this last one, quote, and I'm not going to go through the third thing in the book. I don't think it's fair for me to do that. Read it, study it yourself. But it's got a nice quote. My 2 main goals as a parent are to help my children gain self-esteem, or in other parts of the world people refer to as self-confidence, and self-discipline. I prefer the word myself, self-confidence. Give 2 main goals as a parent is to help our children, our grandchildren, get self-esteem or self-confidence and have good self-discipline. So on that note, a book that was originally created in 1983, still a bestseller around the world. And Spencer Johnson is the author of Who Moved My Cheese, and also the 1 Minute Mother, which I don't have in my library. I'm going to go and order that, and hopefully on Mother's Day I'll be doing a book video on that actual book. So on that note, if you like this brief video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, leave your comments, and share the video. Maybe there's someone in your family that needs to hear the message today as a nice reminder, even if you have read this book before. So on that note, thank you very much. See you again next week for another book video episode. And don't forget to watch some of the other shows on the channel. Bye for now.